So I think I'd been on the job about 3 weeks, and I was invited into a big fancy conference room that had a big fancy sort of oval table. And at the head of the oval table was the president of the company that I was working for at the time. And basically we were going through the annual talent review where basically the head of talent for the company I was working at discussed sort of what our plans would be for the next year. And so the president of the company at the time was sort of going around the room and asking a series of questions, which he was getting good answers for. One of the questions he had, one of the final questions he had was regarding a special talent development program we had for new grads. Okay, and basically what happened was new grads would come in, do a year rotation for 5 years, so 5 different rotations, and they get hired into a manager role. And everything had been working well with this program. Everyone was comfortable with this program. But the president of the company wanted to know specifically how many people, how many candidates would actually be coming into this program the next year. And so the vice president of talent for the organization confidently answered the question, and he said basically around 50 people. Then the president asked the question that was a little bit more interesting, and he basically says, why 50? Why 50 people specifically? And you could tell from the look in the eyes of the vice president of talent that they didn't quite know the answer to that question. So they quickly turned to their manager and asked, yeah, hey, how many people next year are going to be joining the rotational program? That manager didn't know either, and he turned to his manager and quickly asked the question, yeah, how many people next year? And that manager as well did not have a good answer. And so everybody in the room then turned to me and asked, hey, new guy, how many people are going to be joining this rotational program next year? And of course, me being only on the job for 2 weeks, I didn't have an answer right away. So I said, let me get back to you in a couple of months. Let me do an analysis and see what I find out. And the results of the analysis were pretty startling. First thing we found out was that basically the size of that class was roughly 2 times too large when we factored in productivity. The second big finding that we found, and potentially the more important finding that we found, was that after the 4th year of the rotation, the probability of one of these candidates leaving the company increased by almost 13%. So what we became essentially was a breeding ground for new talent, okay? And so what the point of this is that anytime that we as an HR function make decisions regarding a policy or program in the organization, it's really important that we do it with data, that we do it strategically, and we do it so that it's aligned with the business. Okay? My name is Ross Sparkman. I'm the head of strategic workforce planning at Facebook. I'm super excited to be speaking here at the HR Global Digital Congress for the first time, and it's an absolutely wonderful opportunity. What I'm going to be talking about specifically is about the importance of using data to make decisions with respect to the workforce. I'm going to be talking a little bit about some of the factors that we should be considering when we're building a people analytics function. I've been at Facebook for 4 years now, and in that time I've seen a massive amount of growth. We've essentially increased the size of the company 4x, and it's just been a wonderful experience to see how using strategic planning and using analytics leads to a workforce that is as productive and as dynamic as what we have at Facebook right now. There's a phrase that you may or may not have heard that without data, you're just another person with opinion. Think about that for a second. Without data, you're just another person with an opinion. If I was to walk into a meeting and make the statement that I think attrition is going to increase next year because commute times are getting longer, that's an interesting opinion. That's an interesting, and maybe there's some truth to it, but it really is just an opinion. Now, what if I said something more along the lines of, we ran a regression analysis that basically suggested that for every 5 extra kilometers in commute time and distance, you would see a corresponding spike of 8% in attrition. And we've ran the analysis and we quantified that. Suddenly, that opinion now becomes a lot more realistic and it comes to light. So it really demonstrates the importance of using data to make good decisions. So let's try to think about it more conceptually. Like, why should HR be data-driven? Well, if you think about a typical organization, what do you think of? You think of a series of different functions that are led by managers who have been entrusted to make the best decisions for those functions and for the company. And how do they make those decisions? If you think of a manufacturing manager, or if you think of a manager of product development, how are they making the decisions and the recommendations that they're doing? Well, they do two things. First, they use their experience. And the second thing that they do is they use data, right? So they use a combination of data and experience to make recommendations that will help to sort of increase the shareholder value or positive business outcomes that the company can expect. HR, on the other hand, has been a little bit different, a little bit slower to the table. Historically, I think when we think of HR, we think of more of a cost center function, a transactional function, a function that just processes transactions all day. But the reality is, in this day and age, as data have become more and more important to organizations, we're starting to see CEOs look to the HR function to be as data-driven as the other functions in the organization. And why shouldn't they be? HR really, is in charge of the most valuable asset that a company has. It's people. So it becomes really, really important then that we use the same analytical rigor and the same decision-making process with our people that we do with the other parts of the business. But that's still probably not enough. Let's take it even a step further to talk about how HR plays into adding shareholder value. So if you think of shareholder value really as being the stock price of a company, what moves the stock up? What increases the stock price? Well, there's sort of four kind of primary factors that really help to drive an increase in shareholder value, okay? The first really is around revenue growth. And what we're talking about here is chasing next quarter's earnings. We basically want to see a linear path in how we're growing our revenue month over month. We just want to see a nice, strong linear path. The second is asset efficiency, okay? And this is basically how do we manage our assets such that they create more revenue to improve our bottom line. And a quick note here is that, yes, people are our assets. So when we're talking about asset efficiency, we do want to be thinking about, are we managing our people efficiently such that they're helping to drive that shareholder value? The fourth component that we should be considering is how we tell the story to our shareholders around data and the two other factors that asset efficiency and revenue growth. And we need to be able to tell a really clear, succinct story around how we're doing that. And finally, the fourth and maybe the most important variable and factor in terms of increasing shareholder value that we really want to think about is managing our operating margins. And what does that mean? Well, our operating margins really are our costs, okay? And what's one of the main components of costs that a company experiences? Well, it's the SG&A costs, the selling, general, and administrative costs. And guess what? HR falls square in the SG&A bucket. So clearly, when we're making decisions with respect to our HR function and our HR team, we need to be using the same type of rigor that we do with other functions in the organization to help increase that shareholder value. So it's clear that there really is the possibility and the opportunity for HR to contribute in positive business outcomes as much as the other functions in the business. So it's easy to say that, yeah, we want to become a data-driven HR function, and we want to use data and analytics to become better decision makers, to become more productive workforce, et cetera, but it's not necessarily that easy, okay? And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the maturity curve that you can sort of expect when you start to create and build out a people analytics function. And so I think there's sort of like four different tranches to building a good, solid maturity model. The first starts with just basic reporting. Okay, what is basic reporting? Well, this is the ability just to get some data in the hands of leaders. How many people actually exist in the organization? Where do they exist? What level are they at? How much are they compensated? So really just basic reports, okay? And I think that this is probably where a lot of organizations are stuck right now in terms of their people analytics function. And some of them don't even have that. The next stage would go from just these sort of basic reports to an environment now where we have more automated solutions for our reporting, where we have dashboards, where we have push reports, where we have the ability to slice and dice data in real time to give leaders and managers the ability to make decisions quicker and faster. So that's sort of the next level in the maturity curve. And then we, I think, crossed what I call a chasm, a big sort of skip between being more of a basic sort of people analytics function to a more mature people analytics function. And that's when we start talking about doing more statistical analyses, okay? We're trying to now understand what happened, right? Why did attrition increase by a certain amount in a certain region, right? Why are some people and employees better performers than others? Why are some managers better managers than others? In order to do this, we need to use more sophisticated types of statistical analyses. And so now we're starting to get into more contemporary, modern people analytics functions, right? And we need different skill sets. The final stage and sort of the North Star of a good people analytics function is to be able to get to a point in time where we're able to start predicting business outcomes, right? Where we're able to predict attrition, how many people are going to leave the company next year, right? Where we're able to start driving predictions around the size of the workforce and what type of managers will be good managers and what type of potential candidates will be good performers and high-performing people across the organization. So to be able to do that, again, requires an entirely new set of skills, which we'll talk about shortly. So I think there's 4 foundational pillars to building a good people analytics function, and I want to talk about those. The first, and really the most foundational and sort of cornerstone piece, is the ability to actually craft a vision, right? We need to know where we're going and what success looks like with our people analytics function, okay? To have a successful people analytics function, though, it becomes really important to have the right people on the team. And depending upon what that vision is and what the goals for that vision are, the skill sets and the distribution, the type of people that you will need on that team are going to be different, right? So it's really important that we think about the vision and then the people that will help to execute on that vision. The next piece, and this is something that I think sometimes gets overlooked and is really, really crucial, is thinking about the processes, right? How do we develop systems and processes that allow us to intake data, analyze that data, and get it into the right hands of the people that need it, that can make decisions with it in a timely manner? How do we do that? It's not as easy as it sounds, so we need to have really good processes in place, okay? And finally, what we need to think about is technology and the data to do this, okay? If we want to get to a point in time where we're building a really scalable and self-sustaining people analytics function, inevitably we're going to need A, clean data, and B, technology to help us scale and grow the people analytics function. So those are the 4 pillars that I want to talk a little bit more about. And we'll start with that vision piece right now that is so crucial to building a good people analytics function. So how I frame this is to think about the maturity model that we discussed and to then think about some goals that maybe we want to achieve in our people analytics function. So maybe we're a smaller outfit, maybe we're a small manufacturing plant somewhere in the world that doesn't have a lot of people. And really our goal is just to be able to understand our workforce, okay? In this situation, maybe our vision is to just have basic reporting capability, okay? And that there's nothing wrong with that. You have to start somewhere. Maybe we're in a situation where we want to be able to understand what the size of the workforce is and be able to make decisions faster in real time. Well, now the decision and the vision becomes around building dashboards and having the ability to cut and slice data in different directions and in different ways that allow us to really, really make decisions faster. Then we maybe want to get to the next level, which is to understand why certain events in the workforce are happening, right? Why are we seeing attrition spike when commute times spike? This is when we start to cross that chasm and get into this more statistical analysis. So maybe our goal for our vision is just to be able to answer questions like that, right? Why is manager A more effective than manager B? And that's our vision, just to be able to answer and provide context and story around simple questions like that or more complex questions like that. Finally, or second to last, we want to get to maybe a point in time where we can maybe predict what's going to happen in the workforce tomorrow, right? So rather than having to be a reactive function, we actually are in a place where we can predict what will happen next year or the year after, so we can put the controls in place and we can take the actions necessary to mitigate against the risk or take advantage of the opportunities that might present themselves. And that requires predictive analytics. And finally, and I think this is sort of a North Star, but maybe we want to get to a point where we have an optimized workforce, right? And what do I mean by optimized workforce? I mean that we have a workforce that is the right people in the right place at the right time for the right cost, producing productivity that builds out and creates value for our shareholders, okay? And to do that requires an even more sophisticated and elaborate skill set around optimization, around predictive modeling, machine learning, and other types of contemporary analytical techniques. So the point of this slide is really to say that you start with a vision that's based on some sort of business need, understand what that final goal or the vision is and what the business outcome is, and go from there. So building off of the vision, now what's the next step of the process that we really need to think about? Well, arguably the most important part or component in building out a good people analytics function is actually having the people on the team that can execute on that vision. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the type of people that you need to build a good people analytics function, and really the type of questions that you need to ask yourself when you're going out and building out that team. So the first question that you need to ask yourself, and maybe the most logical question is, well, what's the vision, right? If our vision is to build out some sort of an optimized workforce, the type of skills and the number of people that we're going to be required is going to be vastly different than if we just want to build out a basic reporting function. So it starts with asking that question, well, what's the vision? The next piece is, what are the skills specifically that will be required on that team? Okay, again, if we're building out and our goal is to really just think about some sort of a statistical workforce planning people analytics function that just answers more inferential statistical questions, then all we really need to do is find people with good statistical skills, right? So definitely we need to think about the type of skills that will be required based on that vision. Next question we need to ask ourselves, and again, this might seem intuitive, is what skills actually exist in the organization today, right? Do we need to go out and hire people? Or do we have people in the organization today that could actually function in the role that we're looking for in our people analytics function? And oftentimes, if we look at the marketing analytics function or parts of the engineering function, there are people that really do have the type of skills that are required to build out a good people analytics function. So always we should be looking internally to see if there's room to leverage what's already exists in the company. Next piece that we need to think about is how big does the team need to be? Okay, and this is always a challenging question because I think what happens a lot of times is as we grow and start to mature our people analytics function, the demand for that function and the demand for the services that we're providing start to increase. But the challenge is we don't necessarily have more resources. So it's really important to think about, again, that vision and how many people would actually be required to build out that vision and to make it a reality such that we don't end up getting inundated with too much work that we can't actually complete. So a good exercise that I like to think about when I'm trying to advise folks on the size of a people analytics function is to have them ask the question, if there was only one person or one skill or one problem that I could solve that would require only one person, what would that person possess in terms of skills? What role would that person possess? Or what role would that person be involved in? And this provides a background for us to think really critically about what skills we need to get in the door right away to start executing on our vision. So I want to talk a little bit about the different type of skills that are required in the different stages of the maturity curve. I talked earlier about the maturity curve, and we said that we go from basic reporting all the way up to predictive analysis. Now, clearly, depending upon which stage we're at and what our vision is, the type of skills that will be required at that stage will be vastly different. So I want to talk a little bit about that. The first thing you'll probably notice, though, is that across each of these stages, there's 3 skills that are required on all the stages, and that is consulting skills, that's communication skills, and that's leadership skills. And the reason these skills are so important is really twofold. A, we need people that understand business, that have business acumen, that can ask the right questions to be able to understand what data to even look at and analyze. A lot of times our stakeholders don't know what they don't know. So it's important for us as a people analytics function to be able to speak their language. The second piece is that when we do analyses and when we go to present to our stakeholders, not everyone has the data fluency that the people analytics team has. So we need to be able to turn our analyses into something that's more consumable for our stakeholders. Okay, so that's why we kind of have these three skill sets as being really important across all the different stages of the maturity curve. With respect to the reporting, basic reporting skills, I think the most important foundational aspect to be able to have in basic reporting is the ability to have SQL, SQL skills, so we can actually pull data out of our warehouse. The ability to manipulate data in Excel is really, really important. And really to understand how to use databases and understand data warehouses are really, really crucial, and probably for our people analytics function that's just getting started are the three most important skills that we should be looking for. When we move to sort of the automation and the dashboard component, we need the same skills that we had in the basic reporting piece, but now we need people with a little bit more business acumen. We need people that understand how to build out dashboards. We need people that understand metrics. We need people that understand how to work with vendors, because a lot of the times, if we are building sort of self-service reporting capability, we'll use a vendor. So we need people that understand how to assess vendors. So these are some of the skills that we want to think about when we're moving into the dashboarding stage, along with those consulting, leadership, and communication skills. Now we cross that chasm into the statistical analysis skills. Now the skills that we look for are becoming a lot more technical in nature, okay? And obviously, the first skill, most important skill that we want to have is statistical aptitude, right? So we want people with some sort of background in statistics that can interpret a logistic regression analysis and understand the implications of it, okay? We also want people that have the ability to manipulate data in visualization tools like Tableau and other visualization tools to help tell the story. So the third skill that we need to consider, and we talked about this earlier, is when we sort of cross this chasm into a vision of being able to answer more statistical questions, the actual skills around understanding statistics, being able to interpret the results of a logistic regression, being able to communicate those results and understand the implications of the output of an analysis like that become very important. So now we're getting into an area where the skills are much less common, and we have to be more selective about the people we choose. We also want people that not only have statistical analyses, but the ability to manipulate data, to turn data into visualizations that help to tell stories, that can use tools like Tableau to build out their analysis. So these are some of the things we want to think about when we're moving into this statistical phase of the maturity curve. The final stage is around predictive analytics. And again, we need all the same skills that we had in the first three stages of the maturity curve, but now we're looking for more contemporary skills. We're looking for people that understand machine learning, that can code in Python and R, that have a lot of background in data engineering, that are true data scientists. And again, the farther that we go up in this maturity curve in terms of skills, the more rare that those skills become on the market, but the more valuable they become to the organization. So we've talked a little bit about the vision and the importance of the vision. We've talked about the type of people that we need to have on the team to drive the impact that we're looking for in a vision. A part of building out a people analytics function, I think, that gets often overlooked is the importance of the processes that are incorporated in building out this function, okay? And what I'm talking about here, again, is really asking a lot of questions that start with the vision. What is our vision? Okay, because understanding and having a clear direction around our vision gives us guidance around the types of processes and systems that we need to have in place. Okay, so first question, what's the vision for the function? We've talked about this, we know what it is. The next question we have to ask ourselves are, who are our stakeholders? Okay, who are we actually delivering these insights to? Are we doing it for the CEO? Are we doing it for our head of HR? Are we doing it for line managers? We need to understand who our ad hoc consumers are, who our primary consumers are, and who our secondary consumers are. Because depending upon who they are, there can be different delivery mechanisms around how we get them the insights and how we describe the insights that we've derived from our analyses. Another piece that's overlooked often is understanding how the consumers of this data actually like to receive the data. Okay, there's some people and some of the leaders like really well built out decks that describe methodology, that have recommendations, that talk to different scenarios. There's other leaders that just want a quick email with a yes/no answer. Okay, so when we think about who our stakeholders are, we also need to think about how they like to receive that data and the best way that they're going to get that data that helps them to understand and solve the problem that they're trying to solve. Okay, so that's a really important fact for us to consider as well. And another thing to think about, in addition to how consumers like to get their data, is how do they ask for the data? Okay, is there a ticketing system in place? Is it somebody coming and tapping you on the shoulder and saying, hey, I want this analysis? Is it through emails? Is it through the water cooler? It's really important to have some sort of a system in place that allows people to actually ask you for analyses, and to ensure that the way that they're asking it helps them understand that they're asking the right questions. So making sure that we have a system in place for how people ask for data. And then finally, how will the team actually prioritize the requests that they get, the people analytics team, that is. I talked a little bit earlier about when we start to develop people analytics functions, it's not uncommon for the demand to start to increase exponentially once the word gets out, okay? And so now we face a situation where we have multiple different requests from multiple different stakeholders that have multiple different timelines associated with them. We have to understand and develop a system and a method for being able to prioritize the types of requests that we're getting, such that we're keeping as many people happy and satisfied and meeting as many expectations as we can. Okay, so look, I want to talk about some process do's and some process don'ts to think about that I've found in my experience working here at Facebook and in my career can help with the process and systems decisions. So let's go through a few of those. The first is make sure that you have some sort of triage process in place based on the type of request. And this sort of speaks to that prioritization piece, right? So we really want to be able to ensure that we know which requests that we need to go after first, okay? Ensure that we have some sort of a process in place that basically describes the different types of methodologies we're using, and make clear that our stakeholders understand our methodologies and any assumptions that we've included in our analyses. I think it's also really, really important to have some sort of a system built in that allows us to follow up with our stakeholders on the work that we did. Right? A lot of times I've seen situations where we just deliver and we ship some sort of analysis. We don't ask our stakeholders if that analysis was actually useful or helpful. So let's ensure that we have some way of incorporating a feedback loop to make sure that we're actually delivering what was asked of us. Okay? Make sure that we structure the types of analyses and the processes that we do around the structure of the organization. Okay, do we have a centralized system or a decentralized system? Do we have a centralized company or a decentralized company? So take into account the actual structure of the organization when you're building out a system. It's really, really important that we do that. And finally, ensure that we establish that we have metrics in place that help us to measure the effectiveness of our people analytics function. Okay? The purpose of a people analytics function is to lead to better business outcomes. If we've established the people analytics function and we don't know if it's actually helping, then what's the point of continuing with the function? We need to make sure that we've established certain metrics in place that help us measure the effectiveness of that function. Now, there's also some don'ts that I want us to think about with respect to building out systems and processes with a people analytics function. First of all, don't not have an input intake process in place, which is sort of common knowledge, but we really want to stress the importance of having that input intake process in place. Don't leave our stakeholders in the dark with respect to when they're going to get an analysis, when they're going to get follow-up support. It's really important that you continue the communication line with your stakeholders and that everybody is really clearly aware of the approach that you're taking. Don't forget to manage the expectations of the stakeholders, okay? If you are providing multiple types of analyses to multiple stakeholders, ensure that they understand where they fall in terms of priorities, how long it's going to take them to get their analysis, and what they can expect in terms of the final output. That's really crucial that we do that. Don't ignore feedback. Okay, I talked about the importance of asking for feedback. When you get the feedback, make sure that you're taking it serious and that you're actually incorporating it into your processes and your systems. Really take this feedback serious, because that's what's going to help improve the effectiveness of the people analytics function in the long term. And finally, this is a really important speaking tour, on a listening tour, on a discovery tour, and talk to your people. Let them know that you're here to support them and help them solve their different types of issues. Okay, so that's a little bit about some of the processes and team dynamics that we need to think about, and the actual vision. I want to talk a little bit now about the importance of data and technology. So first, there's sort of 4 components that we want to think about when we're thinking about data and technology, and more specifically talking to the technology aspect of building out a people analytics function. The first thing we need to think about, if we were to go and source some sort of third-party solution to help deliver our insights, we need to think about the usability of the tools. Is it something that's actually going to be easy for our stakeholders to use, or is it so complicated that people are not going to want to use the tool? Okay, the relevancy of the technology and the tool. Are the metrics and are the outputs of the tool actually answering questions that are relevant to the business, or is it something that we need to do on our own that a tool can't provide us the support that we need? So relevancy is a really big question. If we build a tool that centers around attrition reports and attrition is not an issue at our company, well then the tool that we've selected is just not relevant, and that's a big factor that we want to consider. The scalability of the tool and solution. Okay, is it a tool that, if we're in a high growth environment, will scale with the speed and growth of the company? Or is it something that will be used strictly by the people analytics team to help them deliver insights, right? So we need to think about, is this a self-service tool for our managers to use, or is this a tool to help with our people analytics team to deliver insights? Big questions to answer. And then finally, the cost versus the benefit, okay? If we're using some sort of an external tool, is the cost justified in terms of the output and the benefit that it's providing? Or could you get more impact with an FTE equivalent as you could with the tool itself? So these are some of the things we really want to consider in terms of when we're going about some sort of a technology solution. So there's a lot of different, when we're talking about technology solutions, there's a lot of different paths that we can actually take. Some are more expensive, some are more sophisticated, and some are simpler. And so I kind of wanted to highlight some of the different tools from a technology perspective and from a data manipulation perspective that we could potentially take. Again, and it's all dependent upon what our vision is, what we hope to achieve, the processes we have in place, and the people on our team. But some of the different tools and technology that are out there to support and building out a good high-powered people analytics function are things like the software vendors that I just mentioned. There's good vendors like Vimo and Visier out there, and a lot of the big warehousing solutions like Workplace or Workday are even starting to develop different solutions. There is different types of data visualization tools that we can now use, whether it's just using Excel to create different data visualization tools or using a tool like Tableau. We can use these tools to really help tell stories that are not necessarily really costly to implement and to use to support our people analytics function. We can also just use and stick with our data warehouses, our HRIS systems. If we have a good analyst in place, and if all we want to do is establish a good reporting function, then we can really leverage our data warehouses. You know, data warehouses today versus 10, 15 years ago are a completely different world. They're much more sophisticated. They offer much more services and features than they did in the past. So if we have a good analyst in place, you know, that analyst could probably leverage a good data warehouse Workday to really drive a lot of insights. And then the final piece would be just to use some of the basically open source solutions that are out there, R or Python, that are free. Again, if we have a good team with the right skills in place, you can have an analyst that uses R to do some of the most magnificent, brilliant, insightful analyses plus visualizations out there, and better than a lot of the software solutions. And again, that kind of highlights why it's important really to think about the skills and the composition of the team. So those are some of the potential solutions that are out there from a technology perspective. There's kind of an activity that I like to follow in terms of walking through and assessing different technology solutions. I've kind of developed some criteria that I like to either ask a software vendor or ask myself and my team to kind of help flesh out and compare different solutions against each other. So I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about some of those criteria and some of those questions that you should be trying to ask yourself and kind of wait to make decisions around what type of technology solutions that you should potentially choose. Some of the questions are along the lines of, does the provider offer customization? Okay, and this is one of the big challenges I think with using software vendors, is that they don't always provide the level of customization that is required for your organization. And the reality is all organizations are unique. The distribution of people and skills and talent in all organizations are unique. So it can be challenging then when we try to use one software solution that meets the needs of every single company. So always try to see if there's room for customization in that software solution. Okay, how secure is the data? I think in this day and age, it's more important than ever that we are in a place that we can trust the vendor with our data, because often we're going to have to give them our data, very sensitive data. So it becomes absolutely critical and crucial that we're confident and comfortable that the provider really has different controls in place to ensure that the data are secure. Okay, what sort of support do they provide once the tool is implemented? Okay, often we get into a situation where we have this big implementation plan, we stand it up, and 2 months into using the tool, we have questions, but we don't have anybody answer the questions. So we want to ensure that we have follow-up support and people that are able to answer some of the nuanced questions that we might have once we start using the tool. Okay, how easy is it to integrate the tool into our current systems? Okay, if we have multiple data warehouses and a big ERP in our organization, is the tool or the solution that we're going to use complementary to what already exists in our organization? The question is really important, because if it's not, it can make the implementation process much more difficult and the ultimate success more questionable. And then finally, and one other thing that I've found to be really, really useful is asking for references. And this is something that I think a lot of people don't think about. But if I'm going to go and invest money in some sort of vendor or a solution, I want to know that some of my colleagues in other companies have used it and have found it to be valuable. So if some sort of a software provider can't provide you with references or use cases that have been successful, I would be leery about going with that provider as my software solution. And then finally, depending upon the organization you're in and depending upon how dire the burning platform is for you to start getting people analytics involved in your company, you need to understand how long the actual implementation for the data and technology solution will be. So those are just a few of the criteria that we definitely want to think about in terms of implementing a data and technology solution. The only other piece that I would add that I think is really important, that I didn't specifically call out in the slide, is the importance of understanding the actual data. And you could probably put this up right up there with developing the team. You want to make sure that the data you have in place are clean and you can actually use them. So it's a good idea, it's good practice to ensure that you have a good solid understanding of what data is actually available, how clean that data are, if the data can be trusted, and how easy it will be able to manipulate and incorporate into any solutions. That's just kind of a side that I wanted to add. But let's bring it all together. What do we need to do then to create a high-powered people analytics function? Well, step number one, we need to have a vision. Okay, we need to have all of the stakeholders agreeing on what the vision and what goal and what the success of our people analytics function looks like, okay? Step 2, we need to ensure that we have the right people on the bus, right? Based on the vision and based on what we hope to achieve from our people analytics function, we need to hire the right type of people that can actually support that vision, okay? Third, we need to have the processes and the systems in place to support the people analytics function. If we don't, it's going to be really hard to scale, grow, and actually achieve the types of results that we want to with our people analytics function. And then finally, let's make sure that we've done a lot of due diligence around potential technology solutions, that we've done a good inventory of our data, that we're comfortable with the provider and the technology solutions and data that we've put in place, and that we're ready to move forward. Okay, so now let's talk about some tips and traps that I've kind of learned along the way. There's been many lessons, some good, some bad, that I've learned, but I wanted to touch upon a few of them. The first thing, and maybe the most important component to really driving impact and to get the momentum that you need to really drive the value of a people analytics function, is having that top-down leadership support. You need leaders who are bought in and actually want people analytics function. Okay, that's really, really important. Think about a pilot project. Okay, often there might be a little bit of skepticism from leaders around the potential impact that people analytics actually offers. Start small. Start with a little project to demonstrate proof of concept. When I was at GE, I worked with a client that basically wanted to understand if their workforce was at risk from a retirement perspective. They had an aging workforce, they knew it, but they just didn't know if it was something to be concerned with. So what did they do? I basically helped them to just do a quick distribution chart that basically was a histogram that showed the proportion of the workforce that was nearing retirement. And through this visualization, it became very apparent and very clear that there was going to be a big retirement exodus coming soon. And just being able to have that simple data point, that simple visualization in place, went a long ways to demonstrating the value of building out a more expansive people analytics function. So start with a pilot, okay? Patience, that's another factor. I think that a lot of leaders and people think that the day that you start up a people analytics function, you're going to start to see results and impact. It takes longer than that, right? You're going to do the analysis. The analyses take time. You have to communicate those analyses to your stakeholders and then be able to describe how you need to take action and develop programs and processes that help you to actually improve or take advantage of the opportunities that the data and analyses have revealed. So have patience. That's another really important factor. Okay, so that's really the crux of some of the factors and components that we need to consider in terms of building out a high-powered strategic workforce planning function. I recently published a book called Strategic Workforce Planning that talks a lot more about how we loop in and link people analytics to workforce strategy, the questions to ask, and how we can really use our workforce to drive that value and increase that shareholder value. And a lot of that can be learned, in this book that I published. I encourage you to take a peek at it if you get a chance. And finally, I really wanted to give a special thanks to the HR Global Digital Congress for providing me the opportunity to come and speak to you, to provide me the opportunity to speak to a much broader audience than I've had in the past. I'd love to have the opportunity to work with them and actually have a live session where I come and I can answer questions that you might have and follow-up questions from this. So I think that you can probably expect to hear some more information about that in coming days. And I'm really looking forward to that. And I really want to thank everybody in the audience for taking the time to just listen to me. I think this is important stuff and I think it's impactful stuff. And I love doing this. And I just wish everyone the best of luck and have a great day.